All right, we're here right now with DarkXero from Zero Linux. He's a Linux maintainer, but obviously he does a lot more than that. And we're going to get into some hardware. We may even talk about Windows a little bit and all kinds of things. So go ahead and introduce yourself a little more. I know there's a lot to you, and this is actually the first time we're meeting. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. I go by DarkXero. My real name is Steve. I maintain Zero Linux, and I do a lot of other things. As you can see behind me, I run a computer repair store, and I sell a few accessories. But I'm a hardware guy, software guy. I'm all over the place. So when it's technology, just like Chris. So we
Sweet.
nerd out. We go all nerd.
So you run Zero Linux, which is based on Arch. So I want to jump right in and just say, hey, why base it on Arch Linux compared to all the other distributions out there, and what made you do it? Because you've been running it for what, 2 or 3 years now?
2 years.
Okay.
The reason I didn't base it off of Debian, for example, is because of the old versions and not being bleeding edge, as they call it, but it's not bleeding edge. It's just up to date and latest, basically. And I tried to, because I'm a ricer and I wanted to release something with a beautiful rice. When I tried to install with Debian KDE, I realized KDE was and still is 100 versions behind. So all the configurations that I wanted were crashing, causing the system to crash because of the version incompatibilities and stuff. I tried to fork Manjaro. Manjaro's repositories were not all that great, and their philosophy is against mine. So, and then I tried Fedora. Fedora, I couldn't understand a thing. I'm just going to be honest. I couldn't get it to build correctly or anything. I kept failing. So the only other choice that I had was Arch, and it had everything I wanted. And the AUR, I didn't want to give the users all the AUR packages like some other distros do. I just wanted to cherry pick everything and test everything and then ship with. So giving me this freedom was Arch. The only base that gave me total freedom was Arch. So
I can see that. Like when I did my script, I mean, I could have scripted a lot of different distros, but Arch was by far the easiest to script because it just dropped me right into a CLI, and I was like, hey, away I go. And
yeah, exactly.
So nice to build on.
Yeah,
and learn. I mean, I love Arch Linux for learning. Anybody who's like, hey, I want to learn Linux, I'm like, install Arch, learn it. It just walks you through, and then you're like, I have no idea what all this is, and it forces you to learn it, because I feel like a lot of distributions, especially like in the Debian realm, it's like just a bad version of Windows, and they're just trying to mimic Windows, which to me just does Linux a disservice. So that's why I kind of like Arch for the learning aspect. Now, mind you, I don't really use it much these days, which, as far as like issues and things I've had, specifically like dealing with their keys, like GPG keys and those types of things, can be a little bit trying. So I know you just sent me a bug about Arch, and you got to talk about that.
Here's the thing with Arch. With Arch, as in all the YouTube videos I was a part of, I keep mentioning the same thing. When you use Arch, you're signing a deal. It's kind of signing a contract with yourself. You say, okay, I want to use an Arch-based distro. It's accepting the fact that you are going to encounter those issues, a lot of issues, and you will have to do a lot of troubleshooting. This is the nature of Arch. This is the nature of leading-edge software. Like you mentioned, I sent you a bug about yesterday. That happened yesterday. It's related to Grub, which is the most important part of a lot of distros. It's not a major part of Linux because there's multiple bootloaders. There's Refine, there's System Deboot, and you got Grub. But with Grub, it just decided not to remember itself. So when I updated the system, just as I always do every morning when I open the store, and then I got welcomed with a non-bootable system. It would reach grub, then reboot, reach grub, then reboot, reach grub, then reboot. And since it was brand new, it was fresh bug. When I immediately tweeted out, "Don't upgrade grub," people started yelling at me, "If it's not on the Arch bug tracker, this bug doesn't exist." I was like, "It's brand new. It just happened. It just
0 day." It's the definition of a 0 day, people.
Yeah, I just discovered a 0 day bug with grub. So yeah, with Arch, you should expect these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
You never expect to have a stable system 100% of the time with Arch. But with all that, I still chose it as a base because it gives me the freedom. For me, Arch is still in its teething process because it still has a lot to it. And they tell you from the get-go, AUR, don't use the AUR. It's not, use the AUR at your own risk. Mm-hmm. We don't stand behind it. We're just giving you freedom.
Yep.
But freedom always comes at a cost.
It does.
As William Wallace would tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Freedom comes at a cost. So we should learn to accept these costs and don't, because recently I ran into a person that talks badly about Arch. Mm-hmm. He's like, not Arch-based distros. He's like, Arch, your distro is awesome, but it's another useless distro that will not contribute to the community. I'm like, this is the reason Arch exists. We try to we do our best to tell Arch about the issues. We don't make it public. Maybe we tell
it's community run. There's no big company behind it.
There's no big company. It's individuals.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about Arch. Like most people need to realize and recognize is it's bleeding edge. It's meant from a community standpoint, and it's really good for learning. And honestly, when it comes to desktop environments, I can think of no better environment to learn in. So, no, you're never going to see Arch Linux in a server environment. You're never going to be going into a data center and pulling up, the console and be like, oh, this is Arch. That just doesn't happen. I mean, at least I've never seen it. It's usually always going to be like a rail-based system from Red Hat, or it's going to be, probably a Debian or Ubuntu derivative of that. And those are really the things you see because they're so stable and they release in like 5 to 6 year increments a lot of times, or at least the LTS has that long-term support. And that's why, Arch is great for learning, but at the same time, people need to figure that out. And when it comes to desktop Linux, in my opinion, I would think that I'm constantly changing and breaking things, and I've documented that. I don't know how many times, but it's more about just taking good backups, experimenting, and learning, and that's what I love about Linux desktop, and just in general, whether it's Arch or Debian or Fedora, it doesn't matter to me.
Linux is a breath of fresh air from Windows, but I do what I do as a hobby, and for the fun of learning. Yep. And there's no better distro base to use than Arch to learn the intricacies of Linux. Other than that, it's a hobby. It will come to an end at a certain point. So Zero Linux will come to an end at a certain point. The code will remain out there. Anybody can fork. That's the beauty of Linux.
Yep.
If a maintainer leaves a project, like what happened recently with Latte Dog, but the code is always online. Anybody who really loves that project is free to come and free open source, take the code, fork it, rename it, and release it under a different alias. If I leave Zero Linux, it doesn't mean Zero Linux will die. It will live on as a different name by a different maintainer.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
They can take what you've done and then expand on it, and then like, hey, okay. And everyone likes to start from a different spot. So, whether it's your distro or another one, you can pick what you're comfortable with. And that's the beauty of like Linux. And people are always like, why do you use Linux? And I'm like, well, it reignites that passion I have for computers. And like with Windows, I was just like an empty shell of just like, oh God, here we go. I don't really get surprised very much in Windows these days. And that's boring to me. So a lot of times when I'm in Linux, I just, oh, I can learn this, or I can go down this rabbit hole. There's just so many different places to go in Linux, and really it's just up to your imagination and where it can take you, which is kind of amazing.
The sky's the limit. The sky's the limit. And the transitioning to the Windows side of things, can you believe that since 2013, I have not had a reason to reinstall Windows.
So you're not an avid gamer then.
I've not had any issues. Why, people ask, and how come? Well, if you know how to use Windows and you know what you are doing, Windows is as stable as you make it to be. If you start going to questionable websites, downloading viruses, pirated software, pirated games, of course it's going to be unstable. But if you use it as it was intended to be used, just like you use an Mac OS, well, Mac OS, you don't have any choice. You cannot do anything on it. You can
it's
download
stable.
an app, run an app. That's all
it's reliable.
Yeah. But on Windows, you got a little bit more freedom to do more things. So as by extension, break it in different ways. So that's why you see less Mac OS operating systems to format and repair, reinstall than you see Windows. Windows is unstable by nature.
Yeah.
But it's up to you when you trigger this instability.
It's true. And you could put the guardrails on Windows with group policy and a lot of other things, which I've done. And it does, give a really nice environment. But at the same time, with Windows, I'm thankful for it, because there's been some Windows installs where I've loved, and there's been some that, I've absolutely despised and hated. And my, I guess I would say for Windows, I'm grateful to Microsoft for my career, because it has introduced so many breakages where a lot of those Linux servers and even Mac to some extent, when I did residential work, I really wouldn't see it very much come back, where a Windows machine, I always would come revisit it when that user inevitably tried to install pirated software, or tried to do something that they really shouldn't have been doing, or downloading some weird virus through their email, which I've seen so many times. And, I kind of look back, I remember what Windows was. I know a lot of people say XP was their favorite. That was my probably most hated version of Windows, even past Vista. I would say, just because it just always got viruses, it always broke on so many people. It was probably the least reliable, except for like Millennium Edition and some outliers there before my career. I'm sure Millennium Edition is no longer available anywhere, hopefully. I don't know the last time I saw it, but I remember moving to Windows 2000 Workstation, which was my favorite version of Windows, which was the most stable, just a beautiful thing before they corrupted the NT kernel with the Millennium Edition developers. That was the worst.
We agree on that exactly. My favorite my favorite version of Windows, still to this day, is Windows 2000.
Yeah,
it was the most rock solid version of Windows I've ever seen. But the second that comes after is going to surprise you. It's going to come out of left field.
Okay.
It's Windows XP, but not any version. Windows XP Media Center Edition. For some reason, I cannot understand why. I don't know, maybe the stars aligned when I started using it. But on Windows XP Professional, I had crashes, I had instability galore. But when I installed the Media Center Edition, the copy that came on 2 discs, because it came on 2 discs, never had such issues. I ran it stable, played all my games. My favorite games of all time, it was called Gangsters 2. I don't know if you remember it.
No, I never played Gangsters 2.
The Gangsters 2 is a point and click. gangster game. You tell them to go, but you have to play you have to wait till the gangster leaves, and you have to wither your way into the bar, kidnap someone. It wasn't a really nice game.
Yeah.
But I used to play this game on Windows Media Center Edition. I started it on Windows 2000. And then switched it to Windows XP, but on XP Professional it was crashing, nothing was stable. Then somebody told me, hey, I have this copy of Windows XP, it's called Media Center Edition. Try it out.
Yeah.
I tried it out, and it was stable. I only had one blue screen with it once, and it was when I was, if I remember correctly, I was installing trying to see if my dad's Silicon Graphics SCSI scanner, A5 scanner, would work on Windows, because the Silicon Graphic died.
Yeah.
So he wanted to use the scanner, but as soon as I plugged it in and it started scanning for new hardware, blue screen.
Well, I would say, like, when it comes down to Windows, I look at like the XP era, and I'd say the thing I had the most issue was I was there when it released. And before SP2, it was awful. Like, it just got infected just by putting it on the internet. SP2 was like the introduction of like Security Center, and they started to, I think UAC came a bit later, but that was, I think SP3 was where XP finally ended up, and that was okay. And then Vista came around, and a lot of people have, really nasty memories of Vista with 64-bit support and all that added. But I frankly didn't have that much issues with Vista, because I understood its limitations when it released, and I understood that it was bleeding edge back then, and most software at the time was made with 32-bit, not 64, and that transition was hard. But I don't really hate on Vista that much, actually. I used it in business actually quite a bit. One of my first big enterprise certifications was Server 2008, which was Vista based. And then obviously Server 2008 R2 came later, which was Windows 7 based, kind of. And that was my favorite server distro of Windows era. And it was just such a good time, man. I loved kind of looking back with some of those Windows stories and the things that
speaking
happened.
Of service packs, I found it odd in the XP days, where there was XP 64-bit, if you remember.
Yep. For a brief period, it's like Vista released and XP 64-bit dropped.
So I found it weird where they released Service Pack 3 for 32-bit, but they kept the 64-bit at Service Pack 2.
Yeah.
I don't understand that, but now there's an unofficial Service Pack 3 for the 64-bit, but all that's unofficial.
Yeah. Well, they leaked the source code on XP. So that's sitting out there. I always wondered if someone would take it up and then do something with it, but I think everyone
did. When they created a Service Pack 3 for the 64-bit, apparently Microsoft was already working on a Service Pack 3 for 64-bit XP, but it was never released.
Yeah.
Because they were working on, I don't like to call it Vista, I like to call it by its real name, Longhorn.
Yeah.
And
did you ever see the Mojave experiment from those little fun little ads where they re-skinned Vista after they got it all fixed up, and people were like, this is amazing. Then they're like, yeah, let's just re-release this and call it Windows 7 for the most part. And that's kind of like the origins. There's so much Vista in Windows 7, and people just don't realize. But so funny.
Since the release of the source code of XP, actually, there was one guy who refactored XP with the flatter design, with the Windows 8 flat design, and he made it look awesome. But the instability was still there because it's XP. So you can take an ugly duckling, make it look like a princess, but anything underneath is still going to be ugly. So
I forget what it was when I did it for like an April Fool's joke in like 2020, and I installed XP again, and I remember it had so many like SSL errors, and it was just hard to even browse the internet.
Would crash constantly.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious these days. But,
by the way, speaking of Explorer, did you? I think you made a video of files the one that replaces Windows Explorer, or was
Oh
it
yeah.
somebody?
No, I think that was actually Tech Hut that made the file.
Yeah.
Because in Twitter, I think someone messaged me about Files V2, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's a great project. I need to do a video on it. And then like a couple days later, Tech Hut made a video. I'm like, well, all right, and it performed amazingly for him.
I'm still
And
using it to this day.
It's great.
I'm still using it.
Yeah.
But my problem is when I go to their GitHub and I click on the Windows Store version to download it from the Windows Store, it tells me the Windows Store in your region has closed down. They're talking about the hardware store, not the actual store, software store. So I'm like, okay, you want me to download it from the Windows Store and I don't have access to it? How am I going to download it? So I had to do the source install from source method.
Oh no! Usually, I think. Well, it depends on how they distribute it, but sometimes they do like an MSI bundle, and you can actually directly interface with the store through PowerShell to install store items. I've done that a couple times to cheese getting around that.
Because of my mistakes, now I have two versions on my system. I got one version that is working by default, and one version that is somewhere in the system and downloaded somewhere. So I don't know which is which. So I added a shortcut on the taskbar at the bottom. And I was like, oh, whatever.
Oh, Windows, man. But stay classy.
But you have to admit, seeing open source software coming to Windows, this is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it is. It is. I honestly love getting in there and using like WinGit from the CLI and being able to interface with it without even installing anything. And honestly, using WSL too. There's another guy I follow on like Twitch. He Twitch streams called RWX and he does a lot of programming streams. And he actually moved from Linux Mint to Windows, but he's just constantly in WSL. And I always give him shit whenever I'm in there, but it's funny to see some folks use that.
Speaking of WSL, did you know that there's a WSL for Arch portable?
Oh no.
It's a you can use it integrated in the system, or you can use it as a portable instance.
I think I might have seen that on the.
I'll link it.
Link. I'll check that out.
It's amazing because it's portable. I put it on a USB. I take it anywhere with me if I want to go to a friend's house, because none of my friends want to use Linux for some odd reason. Well,
they're scared. They're just scared of terminal. That's all it is.
No, not really. One of my friends, I understand why he wouldn't move from Windows, because he relies on Adobe, and this is his work. He does After Effects work, so you're not gonna get that on Linux. So I was like, okay, if I go to his house and I want to do a little work, update my repo, for example, I just plug in my Arch WSL USB and I just work on that, unplug it, done deal. It's a really awesome project. The problem with this project is the system D is broke. It's still working on it. It's trying to grab the system D from AUR, the Git version from the AUR, because he doesn't have access to the other one. It downloads the zip file, and then it fails at extracting for some reason. Signing keys, the usual stuff with Arch. And the outdated kernel, 5.10.
I've noticed that a lot of the WSL stuff, they've worked really closely with Ubuntu, surprisingly, to where you're better off if you're using WSL. For those Windows users watching this, I would say definitely just use Ubuntu. As much as I hate Ubuntu, their server version of Ubuntu is solid, and it works the best out of any distro I've tried.
Because the kernel the WSLs use is the kernel supplied by Microsoft.
Yep.
So even the Arch one is using a kernel 5.10-Microsoft-WSL, whatever. And I hate that. I want to install my own custom kernel, because I want to move. As soon as you try to install that, it's borked.
No doubt. That's why I'm just kind of like, I just rock. Whenever I'm doing WSL on Windows, I'm always just rocking Ubuntu server.
I just use the Arch one because it's portable. I don't have to be on my Windows and be limited to my system.
And you have a whole bunch of tool sets kind of tailored towards Arch. That makes sense.
And I work on my website on that WSL, because I use Yarn to configure to build my website. I just pull it.
What are you using on your website? Is that static or?
No, it's kind of static. I don't know what they call it. I have a web developer who works on it, just pushes the code to GitHub. I just pull it and build.
Okay.
It uses Yarn, something called Yarn.
Okay, interesting.
NPM, it's similar to NPM Yarn.
Okay, yeah, I'm using Hugo static site generation for mine.
I tried Hugo,
and it's awesome.
To write Markdown all the time. I'm like,
I love Markdown
stuff.
I'm a Markdown junkie, so I'm like all about it. Like everything I do, like even my notes, Markdown. That's me. But I mean, I would say everything from that, like transitioning that to a web page, like I go for my notes and it already builds my web page for me, and then I just move back and forth.
HTML converters. There's Markdown to HTML converters or vice versa. This is what I used because my website is now converted to Markdown. He converted it for me to Markdown so I can understand the syntax better, because I cannot understand HTML. So for me to understand and to write, to update the text and stuff, it's easier for me as Markdown. You just use hashtags and stuff. It's easy. So Yarn Yarn is just a builder.
Yeah.
But what he uses is a static website. It's using Markdown now.
Okay. So very probably reminiscent, probably like Jekyll and some other. There's a lot. Node.js has one too. But anyways, you brought that up, and I was thinking of WSL, and I remember Dave's Garage making. He was a ex Microsoft engineer. He has a pretty big YouTube following, and he made one about WSL and how it was just as good. And WSL does a lot of things right, mind you, but there is some stuff, like when I do my builds of Hugo, if I do it in WSL, it is ungodly slow, because anytime it interfaces with NTFS, it is the worst experience you could imagine. So that's why anytime I'm working on my website, I'm usually in Linux, or I will literally build or use the binaries in Windows PowerShell compared to using WSL, because it just takes a big dump. And that's why I'm like, I'm out. I even commented on that page he made.
Well, the reason I use Terminal now a lot is because of you and your videos about Winget and how you use Terminal on Windows. There was one of your videos where you said using Terminal is not that scary.
Right.
Even on Windows, you can stick to the PowerShell. You do your updates, you do your installs, you do your web work. You can do everything in the Windows terminal. It's just like Linux. Don't be afraid of terminal. And I agree 100%.
The syntax in PowerShell is a little funky, but you can always access everything. You never have to worry about some weird Microsoft design decision, and you're like, oh crap, how do I change that? You can just do it through PowerShell commands, and you're done. And it's great. I love that.
There's a certain PowerShell has some bugs. Winget specifically has a few bugs where you run the update or upgrade the name of package. It updates the package. When you check for upgrade again, it detects that there's again an update for the same package. It sticks in a loop. It gets stuck in a loop. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. And it's easier for me to update my packages that way instead of going into the store. So Windows, just to summarize Windows is getting better. It's not the monster that people make it out to be anymore. It's opening up. It's going to take them a little bit more, a few more years to open up a little bit more, but it's opening up. They're gobbling up those Linux projects, but they're integrating. They're doing the Apple thing.
I'm pretty happy with all that, because the Linux users, honestly, I don't see anybody leaving Linux to go to Windows. Except there's a couple people that probably will, especially in the developer range. But Linux, the attractiveness of Linux to me is nothing to deal with Windows. I didn't move to Linux because I was like, hey, Linux looks so attractive. It's open source and all this other stuff. I went to Linux because I got really pissed off at Windows and its update cycles. And I was like, hey, Windows is the reason why I went to Linux to begin with. So I'm happy to see them straighten some stuff out.
That's not the reason I left Windows. The reason I left, we cannot say left Windows because we still use Windows for a certain task.
Professionally,
even not professionally.
There's some games and stuff, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll still pull it up every once in a while.
Yeah. So, but the reason I switched to Linux is I was working for Apple, using Apple products ecosystem, stuck in the Apple ecosystem 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had Windows on my personal rig. And Windows, as you said, can get boring. Because personally, I didn't have any issues. Take that as you want, but because I knew how to use Windows, I wasn't crazy and without knowledge.
Right.
But Windows became boring, stale. I wanted something new. I wanted to sink my teeth into something different. So a friend of mine told me there's this thing called Linux. Try it out. See where it takes you. First distro I installed was Naturally Mint. Did not like that. I was like, it's more boring than Windows.
Yeah, that's
just works. It doesn't break. It just works, and it looks the same, and I cannot really customize it the way I want. It doesn't give me the freedom. Next distro I installed was, what was it? Was something called PC Linux. Windows.
Oh, I remember Lindows. They got shut down by Microsoft through a suit.
Yeah. But it was an old version. The last one before I switched to where I'm going to say was ParaOS, the one trying to mimic macOS. It was called ParaOS. Did not like that. I was like, I have a Mac. Why would I switch to something that looks like Mac? Then came the big one. The big one that got me stuck where I am, Manjaro. And I installed Manjaro KDE specifically. And it was love at first try. It was, I didn't move away from KDE ever since. And that was back in 2015. So I was like, that's it. That's the desktop environment for me. This is my love. But I did not like Manjaro's way of doing things.
Yeah, I can see that.
By holding packages and you using AUR packages, incompatibility, and the mess.
I blew up Manjaro instance. I remember people were like, oh, God, I used to like Titus, but then he ripped Manjaro because... I should have read the update notes before I updated a certain way, and it was pretty funny.
And after that, I kept using Manjaro, and it's still installed on my home theater system. It's still there.
It's a good distro. I don't mind it.
Manjaro that is left. I want to switch it, but I don't want to repopulate Plex. I don't want to go through that.
Oh man, for sure.
Yeah, and all the metadata and everything, and especially on capped internet, that's gonna take forever. But that's when in 2021, my heart, when I saw Arco Linux, I was like, this guy knows how to do things. Because
Arco has, he's amazing. Yeah.
He was giving everything out. Everything he learned, all the code he wrote, he was giving everything out. And he created ALCI, which basically is Carly. It's a way of building your own distro using his scripts, the easy way. I was like, wow, with a couple of clicks, I can build my own distro. I have freedom.
Arco has an amazing GitHub. Like, if anybody watches this and you haven't tried the GitHub from Arco, get on GitHub, pull up the Arco Linux repo. There's so much stuff there. They give out all their stuff. Like, I remember grabbing a bunch of scripts and things for setting up Arch Titus. And I think I borrowed a couple ideas from the Arco team because of how well they document and how much they just show. Like, a lot of people are like, here's my Linux distro. And then they basically do enough documentation to say, hey, it's open source, but they don't really give it all like Arco does.
The power of Arco is the documentation via videos.
Yeah.
If you go to Eric's YouTube channel, 3,000 plus videos.
Yeah. Amazing.
Like today, he released 4 videos alone.
Dude.
In a span of an hour. In a span of an hour. I'm like, yeah. So I took the scripts he gave out, and Zero Linux was born.
Yeah.
So I'm like, thank you, Eric. This is all I've been waiting for. My dream has, you fulfilled my dream. And it's been like this ever since. So, but I use Windows in parallel. And I don't use Windows for programming or for professional work or anything, not even for gaming, because all the games I play, like Diablo, it runs on Linux just fine.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I've been actually been playing Lotro online, Lord of the Rings online, and I that's like an old 10-year-old game. It works great on Linux, and I just load it up and it's fine.
My favorite, I only play 2 games. I only play the Diablo series and Doom series. That's it. I don't play a lot of games. Yep. I'm 42. I'm too old to start sinking my teeth into.
We're pretty much the same age, so totally get it.
So open world games these days, they need young people. They don't need people like us. But anyway, all these games work on Linux, so I have no reason to go to Windows. Why do I go to Windows? And if I tell you the reason, everybody's gonna laugh.
Yeah.
I want to stay up to date with Windows. That's the only reason I use Windows.
Because that's a good.
And I need to be up to date with Windows because that's all the customers use. So I need to
and I always tell people that, like, when I'm making videos on Windows, some like really like big Linux neckbeard get kind of upset with me because they're like, oh, I subscribe for Linux content. Why are you showing me Windows content? I'm like, listen, as a professional, I need to use Windows to support, to do all these things professionally. And there's some Linux people that think you can just go get a Linux admin cert and then get into the profession that way. And I'm like, no, Linux admin cert's great, but you need to couple that with like an Active Directory cert from Microsoft, because you're going to need both, because the world runs on Windows, especially the business world. And that's just kind of how things work on the end user perspective. And obviously in the server realm, Linux servers are everywhere. So knowing both is really a mandatory thing.
You hit the nail on the head. You have to know both. Here in Lebanon, we're the third world country. They're not into Linux. The Linux to them, the funny thing is, I had a customer who wanted a server, basically, but not the way we understand servers to be. He wanted a mainframe that all the employees connected to take their files, to take everything using Samba, because, well, Samba is the sharing thing.
Right.
He wanted me to install to get it up and running so people can share files. That's it. It's a storage server. I told him, how about Linux? He was, what is Linux? Is that a type of sandwich?
Here's how I would sell people on Linux. I don't tell them it's Linux. What I usually do in that perspective, how I would have sold that customer would be simply, hey, it's what all the big network attached storage places use. Synology, QNAP, they all use this base thing that I'll set your system up on, and you'll be able to connect with your Windows machines and share all the files. And the best part is it's going to be rock solid, stable, and you're never going to have to mess with it. And they'll be like, sold. Where do I sign? And that's really how I sell a lot of the times, because Linux has some really good use cases.
I undersold it. I just told him, how about Linux? He said, no, I moved on to Windows. I didn't try to sell it. I didn't try hard enough. But
well, it depends. Like, you are a support shop after all. You selling Windows is probably in your benefit than if you sold Linux, because he probably would have never called you.
True.
But Windows is the gift that keeps on giving. So
that is 100% true. If you installed Linux on customers' PCs, they will not come to you for support again. That will be the last you see of them. So, but joking aside, my livelihood is on Windows, and the best part of Windows, this is something a friend of mine in England told me about, and I've been running it ever since. You know how I told you I never had issues? Remember how I told you I never had issues since 2013 on Windows?
Yeah.
I've been upgrading from one version of Windows to the next without having to activate any of them, because each version was activating using the previous one's license.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was doable back then.
Yeah.
So it was activating. That's what I do with customers. Instead of coming to me telling me, please, can you crack my Windows or whatever, install a pirated version. since I have an abundance of those,
Old
$12
licenses.
keys, $12 keys that they sell, I have an abundance of them. When I was in Ireland, I bought a few hundred.
Yeah.
So I just use one key, upgrade them from one version of Windows to the next without having to activate or crack any of them. So this part of Windows, and now I get customers scared of pirated software, especially pirated games these days.
And that's good. Like, you download pirated versions of Windows. I think like TeamOS and some other like pirates out there make custom versions, but man, that's just a recipe for disaster. And when you get to those keys, a lot of people don't even realize those upgrade keys you're using. You can grab defunct systems using Windows 7, strip the keys off of them, and it will activate Windows 10. Those Windows 7 keys, you don't even need to go through the update process. You can actually just plug them in, and then they just work. And I was like, hey, if you're really going to use Windows, there's no reason to use pirated. Like, I remember using like KMS virtual servers and all this other crap to crack stuff. And it's just not needed anymore. There's so many readily accessible keys to use.
If anyone were to use pirated versions of Linux of Windows, make sure you're using a KMS, not some weird ass crack, because KMS are locally hosted. Locally hosted, they're not leaving your system. But careful, Chris, you're talking to an ex-member of TeamOS.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. When we came up with the name back in the 2012, 2013 days, we were building custom versions of Windows 7.
Okay.
But I quickly realized what we were doing. I left the group immediately because the moment they told me, open the DLL, start patching and working on the DLL using Hex editor to strip out some stuff, I was like, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that. I know how to do it, but I'm not. Yeah. That goes against all my...
you can get nothing to gain from that. That's the thing. Exactly. And it's just, it's not a good position to be in. Like, that's why I'm always like, just don't pirate. It's fine. Yeah, like, there's ways to do it legit where you're not out much money, if any at all, and you don't need to. And that's the big thing I tell folks. I'm like, just don't pirate. Don't do it, because there's no reason to in this day and age.
No, well, here in the third world country, there is a reason. Nobody can afford the game.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of people that are going to watch this. They're like, well, I pirate my Windows just fine. Yeah. But I mean, I'm like, hey,
100%.
Yeah.
But no. The problem is in third world countries like mine, nobody, especially that they locked us down where we can no longer use our debit cards or credit cards or whatever to purchase anything online. If your account is not in dollars, as they call fresh money, fresh money mean getting paid from the outside in, not getting paid locally, because when you get paid locally now, you get paid in local currency. When I went to Ireland, $1 was 1,500 of our Lebanese pounds. When I came back, $1 was 30,000 of our Lebanese currency.
Oh, jeez! Now that's some hyperinflation there. I did not realize it was like that.
I'm going to show you something. Oh, it's on charge. I'm going to show you something. This is something that they created now. It's called Lira rate. It shows you the value of the dollar for selling and for purchasing of $1. Now today is 34,100. It changes every 15 minutes.
Oh my!
They created an app where I receive notifications on my watch every time the dollar changes value.
So can you just change those Lebanese pounds to dollars at will, or do you still have issues with that?
Well, I am fortunate enough to get paid in dollars.
Okay.
Because I sell computer parts. And by selling computer parts, you have to sell in dollars. You cannot sell in, because it devaluates every 15 minutes.
Yeah, that would be almost impossible to, stock a shelf with that and run a business for sure.
So, yeah, but because of that, we get paid in dollars, and we don't care about the value, because we can take $1 and exchange it for 34,000, and 34,000 don't give you a pack of cigarettes. A pack of cigarettes here is like $4.
Yeah. Cheaper in here, but yeah, that's still expensive, I'm sure.
This is how we function here. So if you don't have fresh money coming from the outside in, you cannot, and you don't have a bank account using fresh money, you cannot use that money to purchase anything online. But I'm fortunate enough to have worked for Apple in Ireland. I left Ireland in last 2 years ago, but my account is still valid until 2029. My bank account, so and my residency. So I'm using that bank account to purchase stuff online.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I'm surprised they ship all the way to you.
They don't ship. I use a shipment company. It's a
I got you. So you have to ship it to something and then move it. Oh,
in
man.
the States, in Seattle. He's got a warehouse in Seattle. He ships everything to Seattle, and then he is an official shipment company for big conglomerates here. But he uses under the table. He uses a service called Dot. So I asked him for let's say a phone.
Yeah.
He puts it under the table with the big stuff. It doesn't count for him. It doesn't cost him any extra because he has bigger stuff to ship. So this is how I ship stuff through him. But he takes a 20% cut. So
yeah, I get it. Man, that sucks though.
Now I'm aiming to get the Steam Deck.
Dude. It's a difficult ask right there. It's hard to. I ordered mine the day the pre-orders opened, and I just got mine this past month. So, I mean,
I know it's gonna take a while, but
it's cool though. I love my Steam Deck. I will say I expected to hate it, and I was like, it'll make a good couple YouTube videos.
How about?
And it's been good.
How about porting? This is what I'm thinking. That's why I'm raising money for it. Since it's using its own version of Arch, which is basically Manjaro. Yeah. I call it Manjaro Arch because they're doing the Manjaro thing.
Yeah.
And adding on top of that the immutable part. But how about giving users total freedom and porting Zero Linux to it?
It could, because the immutable thing, the main issue I have with modifying it and putting a custom Linux distro on is the interface they've made is next level. It is so darn good with all the integrations. Once you get it, you'll understand, and you'll be like, damn, they really put a lot of thought into it, because the Linux desktop really is secondary to, I rarely am ever on it. I do have a dock set up for it, so I hooked it up and docked it to like a 36-inch widescreen, but it's
JSOX dock.
The JSOX dock, and it's awesome. It's worth getting that with the Steam Deck, and you can dock and use it as a desktop, and it is plenty powerful for everything I was doing, and it's kind of wild. It just blew me away. But
I sold the last JSOX dock 2 days ago.
Oh man.
Someone got the Steam Deck from the US because they live in the US. They were here on vacation. So, and he saw the JSOX, he started looking around, and he's part of town. So he came to my store, he said, do you have this dock for the Steam Deck? I was like, I have only one. I was like, give it to me. And how much is it? How much did you buy it for?
$50.
Oh, you know how much I sold it for?
How much?
180.
Oh my. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Because you have to take into consideration the inflation, the shipping that it takes to get
there.
Here.
I get it, man. I get it. I mean, geez, that's funny.
I bought it from the supplier. For 120. I needed to add a few bucks for.
No. I mean, geez, that's wild. That's wild. Well,
so I had an accessory for the Steam Deck, but I don't have the Steam Deck. And I'm trying to raise funds for the Steam Deck so I can try to port Zero Linux to it. And for the Steam part of things, I'm going to be forking over the Steam OS from the Holo ISO thing.
Yeah.
it's going to be a long way before it gets released, but it's going to take a lot of reverse engineering to get that to work on regular art.
The Hollow ISO team actually has done a pretty good job of emulating what Steam's doing. I think it's based on their official image, and it's decent, but you could probably take a lot of things. The big thing I'd want you to grab from it is the Steam Deck UI and how it interfaces. That's all I care about. The immutable file system and all that other garbage, I don't really care.
Does Hollow ISO use the immutable file system too?
I think so, yeah. I think it's a 1-to-1 copy for the most part, with just some subtle tweaks here and there so it can run on regular hardware.
That's my problem with the Steam OS. It's the immutable part. I want to remove that and unlock that.
They made one command to unlock it and did a rewrite. I did a video on it, but basically, once you do that,
the new image, it's going to overwrite all that.
Yep. Exactly.
That's what I don't want. That's what I don't want. That's the freedom I want to introduce with Zero Linux.
And I think that would be big. That would be big. I know a lot of Steam Deck users. I know I would use it.
If you can add my fundraiser thing on the videos description.
Yeah, of course. I'll put it down in the description. So yeah, check out down in the description Zero Linux's fundraiser to get a Steam Deck so you can build that custom ISO for it, because it's needed. Yeah, it really is, because I would use it.
Yeah, well, I need a new project to sink my teeth into, because Zero Linux has become exactly what I wanted it to be. Once the tool is done and the September ISO is out, there will be no longer main releases, big releases. It's going to be like Manjaro kind of thing, just package update releases.
Yep.
Fixes here and there.
That'll be good.
No more major releases, and that's it. And it's going to be one ISO every 3 months. So I need something new to sink my teeth into. I was looking into the Raspberry Pi version, but that's not going to take very long. That's just installing everything and just imaging and just done. Yep. I need something difficult. I need something to challenge me.
That will be a challenge. I'm just going to say, as I did
challenge accepted. I don't care if it takes a year for me to fork it, but I want something to occupy me during these hard times, because no customers in the store, sitting in the store doing nothing is not.
No. I mean, I get it, man. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up now. And thank you so much for giving me your time and talking about all this. I love geeking out and kind of rehashing the old and even talking Linux to pretty much anybody. So thank you so much for coming out. Is there anything else that you'd want to say before we go?
Thank you for finally accepting to do this, because I've been wanting to do this with you, a person that is my, how should I put it, soulmate in the geek world. We're the same age almost, and we have gone through the same technological advances and going backwards. It's nice to geek out.
Man.
I always wanted to do this, and I will always follow you on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, man. Well, I'm just glad someone enjoys it, and just like me, just having that shared thing, and maybe we could do this again sometime.
Of course, I'm always free. And if you have any ideas to throw my way, I can include in Zero Linux. Go right ahead. And
I will.
Do the same for what yours is called, Chris Titus.
Oh, Arch Titus. Oh man, that's just a setup script. That's no distro.
Not distro, but how to make I'll help out to make your setup script better.
Yeah,
I'm for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
Take care.